Lead Well, Live Whole, the podcast where leadership meets life. Your host, Michael Sirmon, is here to help you rise above the noise, lead with purpose, and live with clarity. Let's get to it.
Welcome back to the Lead Well, Live Whole podcast. I'm your host, Michael Sirmon, and today we're diving into a topic that every leader faces, but few people feel prepared for: change and transition. My guest is Pat Lipovski, founder and CEO of Envision Group International, a globally recognized team of executive coaches and strategists. For nearly 3 decades, Pat and his team have walked alongside leaders from world-class businesses, athletes making the jump from the arena to the boardroom, and organizations navigating seasons of uncertainty. Pat is passionate about helping people not just manage change, but actually use it as a catalyst for growth, alignment, and purpose. From guiding executives through strategy and succession planning to helping Olympians and professional athletes reinvent their careers, his insights are both practical and deeply human. Today, we'll explore what it takes to navigate change with confidence, how leaders can create clarity when everything feels uncertain, and why transitions, personal or organizational, can define moments of breakthrough. Let's dive in. Pat, I'm so excited to have you on the program today.
Well, Michael, thanks for having me. It's a privilege, honestly.
No, the privilege is mine. I've known you for several years, right? Energy Workforce, I think, is where we first connected, and I was impressed with you from day one. Your team, what you brought to the table, the approach to leadership, and just the training that you offered. So I've been looking forward to today because you pretty much live out every day the philosophies and principles that I try to espouse and that I try to live by. So I appreciate it in you, a kindred spirit.
Well, and the compliment. I hope to resemble that anyhow.
I learned a lot about you as I was studying your background to get ready for today's show. Right? Because I thought I knew you, but I really didn't. Because I knew you as a coach. I knew you as a teacher. I knew you as a leader. But you've got a unique journey, brother, right? BMX freestyle shows, stunt riding in the movie Rad, which now I'm going to go back and watch that again, to leading executives and athletes, right? So how has your own story of change shaped the way you coach people through theirs?
Well, Michael, that's a good question because, everybody's had their own journey, and
right.
We unpack where people have come from, and they start to look at, some of the points of interest and points of prominence and where they've come from. It helps them better understand where they're going. And
right.
Thanks for bringing up the movie Rad because, I just turned 60, and that movie was filmed 1985, released on March 20th, 1986.
Right.
And, I got to look at that. Those are some of the best days of my life at the time. And moving forward, all the things that I learned from the sport, setting up a business, working in partnership with other people who are on the team and sponsors, and even some of the people who watched our shows over the years, you just get into the position where you've got an impact on other people, and that whole philosophy carried forward in life to where I'm at today.
Right, and it shows. You live it out. And we were talking before the show about the focus and the intensity, and just how being open to opportunities, created pathways that you've never thought you would see yourself walking down.
Oh, yeah. There's and everybody's got their items of significance in their life where a door opens, and either you choose to have a little courage and walk through it, or you let it pass you by, and you might have regret.
Right. Fear stops a lot of people, right? Larry Kerr and I, when we were talking about, when you do things outside of yourself, when you do react or respond in ways that you don't normally do, either by pushing out or pulling back, that a lot of that's fear and uncertainty. And I found myself in my life that there's every crossroads, you have to make a choice, right? I'm either going to stay where I'm at, or I'm going to take this opportunity. And a lot of us don't, right? I've had the fortune of having a really good wife that when that opportunity is there, she's like, look, I don't want you miserable, similar to what we were talking about in your story, right? And so she will support and push and go. It's like, I don't know how we're going to do it, but we'll figure it out. And we always do, right? So you've been married 27 years now, right?
Yes, 27. We were married January 3rd, 1998.
Nice.
So
Nice.
it's
Well, congratulations.
27 and a half years if we're counting. But, I'm blessed with the same thing you are, where I don't think I'd be where I am today without my wife. I remember the
Right.
days when I was in corporate and looking for change and, doors were opening. And of course,
Right.
I had that same fear and wasn't sure if I should walk through them. And she's one of the people that gave me the confidence to do pretty much everything I've done over the last 27 years.
Yeah. Yeah. It takes that partnership, that teamwork, right? And knowing that, what Cammie and I have discovered is that there's times that I'm down and she's up, and times that she's down and I'm up. And, those rough times are when we're both down, right? The awesome times are when we're both up. But we're always there to encourage each other, hold each other up, and try to be that guiding voice sometimes, right?
Yeah, well, it's nice having a support group around you. Your significant other is probably the most important person.
Right.
And, I'm blessed to say that, during my life, I've really leaned on people who've been great support for me back in my BMX days. And I could name a bunch of guys that actually were just incredible that I'm still connected with today, right through my corporate life. And when I left the corporate world and hung my own shingle, there's many people who have supported me through different thick and thin, good and bad, you name it.
Right. So one thing I've never heard you say is, I did this, right? It's always a we.
Yeah, back in 1998, I founded the Envision Group. I was actually still working in the corporate life and telecommunications at the time. But, again, I had an idea. And I was reading up on coaching and, mentoring, and I was practicing that in my corporate life. And the team I was leading at the time, I'd had the privilege of moving up in the company I was working for at the time. It was called Sprint Canada. Back in then, for the lease, there was a bunch of marketing that some timers like myself might remember. But my team was doing phenomenally well, and somebody from head office came out and they said, your team could be doing even better if you were harder on your team and fired your bottom performers. And that was the exact opposite of what I was practicing.
Yeah. Yeah, that was, what was that? Good to Great, I think, is one that really started pushing that, right? You could rank everybody, get rid of all your C's, push everybody up to A, re-rank them again. The A's are now suddenly C's and get rid of them, which is good for short-term performance, but it's really not good for developing that trust that the team needs and that sense of stability that people need to have identity with what they're doing. So,
and Michael, I got to tell you, it's interesting that you bring that up because, Jim Collins, in the book Good to Great, there's some incredible philosophies and great points to help any organization or leader move forward. The one thing I can say is that, all of us are born with, if we're born with 2 arms, 2 legs, and 15 senses, you think about looking in the eyes of a little baby, you're looking into the eyes of somebody with 10 out of 10 confidence.
Right.
What's interesting is we grow up, there's one word with 2 letters in it that starts with N and finishes with O.
Right.
And for our safety and security, but it takes away the confidence of some of us, and we work the rest of our lives to bring it back. And what's interesting is you see leaders in life now, and this is something back from my early days in telecom. I wanted to take bottom performers and make them top performers. That was my ambition. And ironically, I met a baseball coach in the Woodlands one time, and he stood up in the middle of the workshop after I'd mentioned that, because I say some of these things in the training that I do. But he stood up and said, Pat, I totally agree with your philosophy. He said, I used to follow around all of the top teams in baseball around Houston. In this Woodlands, we're up at the Woodlands Golf and Country Club at the conferencing facility up there. And he said, I take, the people who are cut right at the bitter end of making, and I build teams out of those last players who are cut. Yeah. And he takes these young, dejected kids that are, they just got cut from the team that they just had the heart for, the passion for, and he built his own teams and went to state a few years in a row.
Yeah. So back when I used to coach Little League, we would always pick the team or the kids. We would take the kids that nobody else wanted. And we made it to playoffs every year, right? We believed in them. We had this young kid named Cole. He had some issues with his knees and with his legs, so he couldn't really move fast. But he was our divisional base stealer every year.
Wow.
Right. But he had the philosophy that he could do whatever he set his mind to. And he asked me one day, we were talking, and he said, Coach, how do you think I'm able to steal so many bases? And that's what I think it's because your heart, But the truth is, because you're moving so slow, they don't know if you're on their team or their team. So they don't know to knock you out, put you out. But the truth was, he just believed he could.
Yeah.
And he would every time. And it was surprising because you don't realize it's happening until it's done. And I think life does us that way. We don't realize it's happening until that change or whatever it is that's going to hit us is there. All right, because we don't get, for the most part, you don't get advance notice that you're going to have a major life shift next week, or a catastrophe is going to happen, or an opportunity is going to be there. So you have to be open for it.
Yeah,
and you have to be watching for it. But a lot of leaders resist change, right? Even when they know it's needed, they struggle with it. So you've worked with a lot. So why do you think change feels so threatening to leaders and organizations in general? What is it about it that makes us want to recoil?
Well, I think the first thing is, as human beings, we all resist change. We don't like change as human beings. Now,
Right.
It's interesting because the more we can actually create a zone where we become more change friendly,
Right.
we're on our way. And look at the last 5 years of our lives. The pandemic, that was massive
Right.
change.
Right.
It's technology that's changing so rapidly. We're probably having more technological advancements 1 year at a time than we had back at the turn of the century when the steam locomotive came into figure.
Right.
And so, change is something that's a constant. And that's something I think we've got to get our younger generations used to even more. As much as their thumbs are going to look different in the next 100,000 years, whatever it is, from gaming.
Right.
But, they're a generation where change is imminent. And if they're not used to it, they may get left behind.
So you in your group, right, you really talk about helping leaders achieve far more than they ever believed possible, right?
Yeah, that's our mission statement.
It is, right. So how do you guide someone from seeing the limits to seeing the possibilities during the transition?
Well, can I ask you a question that'll answer your question?
You can.
On a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is you're just getting started and 10 is you've reached your full potential, where do you think you are on that 1 to 10 scale yourself?
I think I'm a 2 if I'm honest, right? Because I just recently changed my whole career path.
Yes.
So I started over. My first thing was figuring out how to actually record a blog, or a podcast. I keep calling it blogs. That's how inept I am. But then I had to learn how to do the podcast. I had to learn how to reach out to people and say, "Hey, would you like to be a guest on the podcast?" So I want to revise that from a 2 back to a 1. Right. because there's so much I need to learn during it. And there's days it's very fun. And there's days it's like, what in the world were you thinking?
Oh, yeah. Well, and I share that with you because when I first started coaching back in 1998, I thought I knew enough to be dangerous and I had some confidence around that. But you're right. One day at a time, one conversation, one session, one group at a time, you just learn how much you don't know. And what I find is really interesting is the more I do what I do, it's the more I accumulate ideas, tactics, and strategies that others have used to become successful. And some things work for one, some things work for another, but at least you've got the perspective that you can use to pay forward to others.
Right.
Now, back to the question of potential, it's always interesting because people who are truly, if I sat in front of somebody and said, well, no, I'm a 9.5 or a 10 out of 10, well, first off, I'm not so sure I believe it, but if they are, I'm happy for them because that's where everybody's working to get toward. But you think about it, we all work towards things, and once we get there, we want to raise the bar. And that is to be human. That's the change we all look for. And I think about it. Why do people play guitars and why do people play musical instruments, do sports, do whatever they do that they don't get paid for? It's because we have a human instinct to get better at things.
True. Yeah. No, that's a good point. That's a really good point. That was a conversation I had last week with a professional athlete, and that's what he was talking about. Right? I want to get better. He said, I'm not competing with anyone. I'm competing with myself.
Yeah, professional athletes are very interesting because you look at some of these people that I've got a cousin that played in the NFL. He was the quarterback for the '88 Redskins Super Bowl team. He was MVP. His name is
They're
Mark.
the commanders now, though, right?
Command, correct?
Right. Okay.
I need to go old school on you.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
and I got a ton of respect for Mark and his whole family. Mark
Right.
and his siblings are all gifted athletically, and if we have
Right.
when we had family reunions back in the day, if we did anything athletic, we just sit back and be in awe of the Rippon family.
Right.
But you look at these elite athletes. They come from when you understand more of their history and their background of where they come from. There's some that come from adversity. There's some that come from challenge. There's some that are just innately driven to want to constantly achieve more. But you think about it. Some of these elite athletes, they've had a coach their whole life.
Right.
They've had somebody who's given them guidance, counsel, but they've built a team of people around them that have helped them move toward what they do in that pursuit of excellence.
Right. No, that's a great point. I remember the first leadership coach I worked with was awesome. I mean, I learned so much. First thing I learned was I'm not real coachable, right? So that I had to change some internal stuff so that I could be coachable.
Yeah.
Because like most of us, I spent my life, I'm going to make it and I'm going to push through and I'm going to do it on my own. Well, you can't do it on your own. It takes a network. I can look back in my life now and I can see those pivotal moments where I encountered that right person who had that right thing to say that I would hear and that I would listen to, and how that shifted and changed and allowed me to see something different. Now, I told you when we were talking the other day, my dad left when I was 2, so a single mom with an eighth grade education raised 4 of us. And she had that drive and push, and she owned multiple restaurants by the time that she retired and then eventually passed away.
Wow.
But there was no stop in her. There was no you can't do it, right? If you put your mind to it and you put the effort into it, you can make it, and nobody's going to stop you if you don't allow them. But she also recognized she needed the people around her. And so as her kids, we learned that push and that drive, but we moved so many times that we didn't really develop that network, understand the value of that. So when I finally got my first coach and started seeing the value of that input from outside and that openness to it, it was real transformational for me.
Oh yeah.
And then my official mentors were the same way. But I also found there's a huge dearth of good coaches and good mentors. Right?
Well,
it's hard to find them.
Yeah, Michael, it's funny because back in the 90s, there's a guy named Bob Nardelli that came out of GE with Jack Welch. But he became the CEO of Home Depot. And when he was the CEO of Home Depot before he moved on to automotive and got into a complete different industry, he put in a quote, he said, people don't realize their maximum potential unless they're coached and supported. I don't think the word supported. I think he just used the word coached. And back then, a bunch of us coaches, we gripped onto that because it was a pretty cool comment.
Yeah.
Very successful person. But it's true. You look at all the top people. You look in business today, the top leaders that are out there have an inner circle. They have, like I call it, their advisory board. And they've got people that they turn to that help them through thick and thin, because if you think you can do it all on your own, I'm sorry, someone's going past you. Yeah.
No, you will eventually, but you'll hit a wall and you'll burn out.
Yeah, you will.
Yeah.
And if you've got that support around you, if you've got advisors, if you've got people that, like I remember back to BMX for a second, because, it's an interesting thing. There's a gentleman by the name of Leon Ebright in Canada. And Leon came from Grand Junction, Colorado, and moved up to Canada for reasons of his own. But when he was up there one day, a bunch of us, my friends, we were out on just a dirt track, and we're building our first BMX track, because in Canada, we love to emulate the guys in California that were new to this sport called bicycle motocross.
Right.
And he pulled up at this, vacant lot that was just dirt, and we thought it might have been the owner, so we're ready to scoot and get out of there. But he called us over to his truck. And of course, you don't want to disrespect somebody who's older. So we pulled up, and he said, "Hey, boys, my name's Leon, and I'm looking to set up a BMX track and to start the sport here in the city I lived in was called Edmonton."
Right.
And back, and after we met this guy, we're all just in awe because he had a vision.
Right.
He took that vision, he built a BMX track, but he was one of the biggest supports. I remember him one race, and I got upset because something had happened, and I went snap, and I threw my bike in front of a bunch of parents and young kids. And he took me aside and he said, "You know what? You don't do that." He said, "There's young kids out here that look up to you." He said, "When you get upset, you ride half a mile that way.
Yeah.
You throw your bike and you do whatever you want to do to it and you carry it back, but you never do that in front of other people who look up to you.
But you used a real good word that I love, vision, right? He had a vision for it. And I think that in my experience, there's a lot of us that are either afraid of our vision or afraid to put a vision out, or we don't understand what it really means. And in your navigational leadership framework, right, you really emphasize guiding versus telling in that process. So when you think about that navigational leadership, how does that approach shift the way leaders help their teams then navigate change, hopefully toward a vision?
Well, it's interesting. It all starts with a vision. People work harder when they find their own answer. That's another philosophy.
Right.
It's, our Envision group, the company that I started back in 1998, and back then it was 3 of us. It was me, myself, and I. Today there's 22 of us.
Right.
18 of the 22 are former clients that I used to work with.
Oh, nice.
As my client. Now, it's interesting because Envision is about engaging people with a vision, because once you understand what they want to have both professionally and personally, and then you get people to start describing in detail what it would look like, sound like, feel like, and act like, how others would be acting like when they get to that place,
right.
They start to get this image in their head, and they start to form that, because very few people, some people who are maybe a little afraid to look forward that far and put together a vision of their own. When you make a safe, confidential place for them to start assembling something like that in their own minds, then where they're at right now, we have a vision model where the V of vision is you visualize where do you want to be and why.
Yep.
Okay. And, similar to if you looked at your favorite vacation destination in the world, and you told me what it would look like, sound like, feel like, and act like to be there, if we went on and you painted a picture for me, I'd probably want to go there.
Right.
Why can't we do that on our professional or even personal lives outside of vacation? So when you get somebody to paint that picture for you, they all of a sudden make a contract when they verbalize it between themselves and somebody else. And where they are right now, the difference between where they want to get to and where they are now is called the gap. And the more they describe that vision of where they want to get to, then they're creating engagement, motivation, and inspiration in themselves.
Right.
Through the art of the question, we lead people towards building that picture in their minds. Once they have it, they become unstoppable.
Right. I agree. Yeah. So a gentleman named Randall Moss, when we would take teams and start training them and start offering them opportunities for education, his big deal was get a picture of something you want, the house, the car, whatever. Right. The first person I saw doing that right back before Tony Robbins and all that, started seeing all them. But it was put that up there so that you have that vision, that motivation in front of you. So when things are tough, because they're going to get tough, you still can move toward that. And I have found that the vision casting, and not vision selling, but vision casting, and getting people to see it, feel it, taste it, experience it, that they buy into it, and then their why becomes so big that it's that motivation they need to push them forward.
Oh, yeah. And when you encourage somebody to sit in front of you and describe the future that hasn't happened yet,
right,
and then you ask them, why is that so important to you?
Yeah.
It creates an abundance and a motivation in somebody that they'll do 10 times what they ever thought. Now, back to elite athletes. Elite athletes are encouraged to do that from a very young age. And some do it instinctually because it's just who they are and how their DNA is programmed. But once you get somebody to really have that vision in mind, engagement is something that becomes theirs. They own it and want to get there.
So I was telling you about Vin Johns, right? Professional bull rider.
Yeah.
And we talked about, people hitting snooze button, and I don't use an alarm clock. I wake up, I'd say I wake up at this time and I'll be up at that time. He used an alarm clock, and he said the first thing he encourages people he's coaching is don't hit your snooze button. And I said, so you're saying you never hit your snooze button? He said, no, I hit my snooze button every day. He said, it's set for 10 minutes. I spend 10 minutes every morning envisioning the bulls that I'm riding. He said, I'm riding the bulls through the process. Every morning I ride them. He said, and my body, my mind, everything goes through the emotions of riding that bull until, for that 10 minutes. And one of the things that he pushed was, like you were just talking about, the the power of visioning and seeing yourself there and understanding why you're doing it is huge.
Yeah.
So my wife and I, we talk about what we're going to accomplish this next year. And then what we start doing this year is we actually map it out, and it's on the wall. So when we go walk by it, past it, we see that, we're reminded of that vision and what those goals and what that is. And if we have to make a choice and it's this or this, well, which one's going to drive us toward that?
Well, Michael, I'm very similar in my approach, because when I work with absolutely anybody as a coach, as a trainer, a lot of the training we do, we'll just give coaching away because it's fun. But if I was sitting coaching you right now, I'd get you to take out a blank piece of paper. I'd get you to draw a line straight down the center of the page, 2/3 of the way down, and then at the bottom of that, left to right. So you got an upside down T on your page, and you've separated your page into 3 sections. On the top right of the page, I get you to write the word have. And on the top left of the page, I get you to write the word be. Now, the have is a point form version of your vision. It's a version of what you really want to have to, be as close to 10 out of 10 in life, professionally and personally, as possible. And some guys will write things down like, I want a Harley Fat Boy one day. It's my favorite bike in the world. Right. And there's other things I want to have, but I also want to have closeness with my family, with my wife, with my kids. I want to have great friends that I support, that support me. Like, there's a lot of haves on there. And it's interesting when you get into a conversation about what people want to have, that's the starting point. But what's interesting is when you start working with people that are a little bit more mature in life, they don't start at the haves because they have most of what they want to have already. Right. They actually start on the be side, because if you put the word be and have together, what's that spell?
Yeah, behavior.
Yeah, and I put my pinky up to my mouth and look like Dr.
I like that.
But when you look at the things you want to have, you look at the behaviors that are going to get you going there, and you're reverse engineering your vision. And once you start looking at the behaviors that are going to get you there relative to the things you want to have, clarity ensues, because the bottom section, so the be list, the have list, but the bottom is the do list. Once you know what you want to have and how you need to behave to have it, you just get clarity on what you need to do, and it works every single time.
Right. So we actually went through that. My wife and I went through that process in January. So you've worked with the Olympians. In fact, I think you're still working with them, if I'm not mistaken, up in Canada.
Yeah, actually, just one point on that. It's we're launching in the month of November up in Canada here. We're launching a program called Play to Lead, where we're taking our Leader as Coach program, we call it Engaging with Vision. And we're working with Hall of Famers that have made the Canadian Sports Hall of Fame coming out of the Olympics and out of elite sport. And we're training a bunch of the elite Olympians to take the program over and for them to deliver it. The intention of this program is to inject the elite athlete mindset into corporate Canada.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and so far we're having great success with it.
Yeah.
There's a few Olympians we're working with in November. One is Cheryl. Cheryl is the head of the Canadian Sports Hall of Fame. Right. And she's actually, she was a curling champion, a gold medal champion. And
that is the world's best sport, by the way.
Yeah, it's pretty.
I love curling.
It's like playing darts with great big huge heavy rocks. But
I know.
Yeah. So Cheryl, she's an individual who, she's a visionary as well. And she sat back and she heard the idea of injecting the elite athlete mindset into corporate Canada. And we're creating the corporate athlete, because we want to get that elite athlete mindset and drive and engagement and motivation into many corporations across Canada. And this is something that we're hoping it leaks across the border and goes overseas to Europe. And, imagine doing the same with, elite athletes in the U.S. and even soccer champions in the U.K., football champions in the U.K. and within the European nations.
No, I'm with you. I'm a Wrexham fan and I'm a Cardiff fan. So yeah, I follow football. Right.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a blast. But I go back and I look at a lot of really good leaders that I have known over the years. Most of them were really good athletes. All right. And I would tell people for years that during the interview, I could tell you if you ever played on a team sport or not. And it was true, right? Because there's a mindset that comes there about the collective is greater than the individual, that and the willing sometimes to sacrifice, right? Because it's not natural for a professional athlete who wants to shine to do a sacrifice bunt, but they know sometimes that's what they have to do. So with you, when you're working with these transitions, right? These athletes that are what Olympians, professional athletes, we'll call them corporate athletes, right? When you're working with them in transition, what lessons from sports psychology carry over most powerfully in the business leadership?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, looking at some of the athletes that I've worked with, there's one gentleman from, I live in Canada, so it's hockey, or if you're in Chicago, it's hockey. But, you look at, there's one gentleman, his name is Marty Jelena. And Marty has been through our Leader as Coach program 5 times. And he was on, in Canada, US, there's a thing called Hockey Night in Canada. But it's televised by one of the major networks. But Marty was brought on to talk about his off-ice preparation as a coach. And they showed some footage of him actually participating in one of our Envision workshops. And it was interesting because one of the team, they called me up and said, well, hey, Marty's on TV. You got to turn on your, to channel such and such. Back when I had cable, now I'm all Roku sticked up. But it's interesting. So Marty came through and he just said that he wanted to really sharpen his skills because we have something called generations in hockey, and we have generations in the corporate world too. And he wanted to keep, on top of how to best motivate, communicate, and develop the younger players in the game. And still, he's an assistant coach with what's called the Wranglers, which is one of the farm teams for the Calgary Flames, an NHL team here in my city. But, professional coaches and athletes, they're looking to develop themselves. But one of the things, and pardon me to go on so long with this point, but one of the things Marty takes part, as many other athletes do in our training as Olympians, is leading isn't telling people what to do. Leading is getting people to come up with their own answer.
Yes.
If we lead through the art of the question, we actually get engagement out of people because people work harder when they put their own answer, as we mentioned before.
Right. No, that's a great point. And I think when you look at leadership, my experience with leadership anyway, right? Understanding what the end zone looks like, understand what the rules of engagement are.
Yeah.
And then my job was to keep you focused on what that end zone looks like and then removing any obstacles, right?
Yeah.
My job was to be your blocker. And I think that a lot of coaches, a lot of younger leaders, especially, they forget that. And it causes some transition and some challenge and some struggle. And then when they move to a new role, it's like everything they learned, is gone, because what got you here won't get you there.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to learn something new, which means that there's some identity loss during those transitions. Right. And we try to rely on what we used to do, which when we were younger, it was kind of bully everybody and doing what we wanted. And then we've learned as we begin to understand human dynamics. But when a career role or a stage ends and people want to hang on to that, how do you help people understand or transition from I want to hang on to what was here so that I'm free to grab a hold of what's here? Does that make sense?
Yeah, how do you get people to want to change is another way of saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Well, you can't make them. You can only create an environment where they want to. And so, again, it's back to the vision. If people really want to get someplace, and here's something too, you and I can't tell people what to do, because do you like being told what to do all day?
I'm pretty stubborn.
Yeah, me too. And matter of fact, my whole family's been trained to be stubborn, which is probably one of our biggest traits that has helped us, but also one of our biggest limiting factors. So if you tell people what to do all the time, Gallup did a survey years ago, and I think they refresh it every single year. But if you tell people what to do, you get a 33% engagement factor or less.
Right.
Now, if you get people to come up with their own answer, the engagement factor goes from 67% or greater. And so, there's a guy who wrote a very under-promoted book, but his name is Bob Tiede. I shouldn't say under-promoted because I think it's one of the best books I've ever read. It's called Great Leaders Ask Questions. Bob's a spiritual guy. The last few chapters get spiritual, which I love. I am.
Me too.
Yeah, if you're not, just you don't have to. But the crux of his book is the whole art of the question, which leaders need to get good at. So if you want to get engagement, one of the little tricks that we teach, and you've been privy to this yourself, Michael, is remember the quagestion.
Right. Oh, yeah.
What a quagestion is it's a suggestion or direction formed as a question. Right. And, anybody listening to this, if you want to practice this, maybe not with your spouse with the garbage or anything, but, when you say to somebody, would it be important if we considered this? Or do you think you've ever considered that in the process of what you're doing? Now, you're suggesting, and when you leave the answer to that quagestion, your suggestion formed as a question, in the eyes of the beholder, their engagement factor will be 67% or greater to act.
Right.
Or if we tell them what to do, it takes away from their confidence. Our job as leaders is to build confidence.
Right.
Okay, and not to take away from confidence, because confidence builds competence. And if you want great teams, then get your leadership team focused on building confidence that grows competence.
No, I like that. I can tell you to do it, and you're going to do it, but you're not going to do what I really need, right? Because I need you to take that then and apply it across the board. And then, but if you adopt it as your idea, then you're going to start applying it. And I've told people, in leadership, as I'm teaching younger leaders, is you're wanting to help them understand how to do it, but you're really wanting to help them understand how to see and how to think about it.
Yeah.
As much as doing the task, or more than doing the task, because that's a skill set then that's a foundation for that next skill set they need. And once you can do that and bring them actually into the envisioning process itself and help them develop that, then everybody owns it. And once you have that ownership, it becomes very personal.
Yeah.
And once it becomes personal, you're going to give that 120%, 130%, whatever's required to get it done. And I've seen teams do that very successfully. And I've seen teams that did it on paper, but never actually got it applied. And the difference between the two teams was just tremendous.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And you've seen that yourself, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And I've seen that many times. And the difference between a good team versus a great team, the great teams are actually run by people that draw on building the confidence of their members. And again, looking back at my time in telecom, I wasn't the best leader back when I was in telecommunications, but I was learning. And the team was 268% to plan.
Right.
And, it was a pretty decent year that we were building. And when somebody came to me to tell me to be harder on my team and fire more of my bottom performers, in my heart, I just knew that would take away from the results that we were actually achieving. But that was the impetus to say, I got to take my show on the road and go out and do my own thing. Right.
So you brought up Jack Welch earlier, and one of the things I loved about him, he was pretty hard, right? He's a very bottom line guy, but my takeaway from him was, if someone doesn't buy into your vision, that's the person you get rid of, right? Yeah. It may not be your best performer, but if they buy the vision, they're the ones you want, because that's going to then be a catalyst for the rest of the team. But you're a Zig Ziglar guy, if I remember right.
I am.
You are, right? And me too. I love you. I actually met Jim, his nephew, worked with him for a little while.
Yeah.
And but you said it earlier when we first started talking about helping people understand what people want, and then helping them get what they want. And I think that takes that battle off the table.
Well, yeah, it does, because as soon as you have that concept between you and another person, they know you've got their back, and they'll work 10 times harder for you or for the cause.
Right. You know, though, in my experience, one of the biggest areas that I've seen I've had the most challenges with leadership groups and even myself at times is really in one, strategy alignment, but succession planning, right? I don't think we understand, either as families or in the workplace or whatever, the value of that succession, right? Understanding the vision that you're setting is not a vision for today. It's a vision for, in a company, 5, 10 years down, 30 years down the road where you want to go. And families are the same way. And a lot of times we don't take that into account. We go with whatever that whatever's hitting us at the moment, and we react to that versus having a conscious decision.
Well, Jim Collins in his book Good to Great, the 8 feet, I think it was 18 Stanford researchers that created all of the material that the book is made of, just by researching companies that were actually, they had the longevity, they had the staying power. But you look at it, within our Envision team, we've broken it down into two concepts, because great leaders, great companies, the leadership within the company have two factors. They have great bedside manner, which are the soft skills of leadership. But back to your point on succession, they also have great systems to lead with. And if you have great bedside manner, those are the top 5 topics on bedside manner are engagement, ability to handle conflict, your ability to deliver feedback, your influence that you have through the organization. And the 5th and emerging one with the younger generations is emotional intelligence.
Right.
The systems to lead with, you think about it, have you ever walked into a company that had a good, solid strategy? Now, again, the fancy guys at Harvard, pardon me to say it that way, but Harvard published a study where they said that most big companies that we know that are out there, even medium-sized or small companies, the strategy of a company is rarely clear, understood, and effective more than 2.5 layers down into the organization. Now, layers, what I mean by that is the president, the owner, or the CEO is layer 1. Anybody who reports to that person is layer 2. Anybody who reports to layer 2 is layer 3, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And, I know that there's some companies out there that, big oil and gas servicing companies, airlines, that have upwards of 10, 11, 12 layers.
Right.
Operations always has the most. And if your strategy is only clear, understood, and effective 2.5 layers down on average, you're missing out. So if you had a systematic way of carrying that consistency and the understanding of how the company plans, right to the boots on the ground or boots on the back or boots in the store, you're 10 steps ahead of your competitors and some, and you're probably worth tens of millions more as a company.
Yeah. What are the common blind spots that you see that leaders are dealing with when they're talking about transition, or you're talking about anything organizationally? What's the big deal?
Well, let me give you an example, because back during the pandemic, we had, myself and some of our team members, we had done some work with a little company in Canada called Air Canada, but their cargo division. Right. And what we'd done is we'd help them put together their strategy, but then we help them align their strategy down to boots on the ground within their organization. Now, your strategy is like the GPS system that guides you from where you are now to your vision or your big, hairy, audacious goal, according to Jim Collins. Now, your playbook is the operator manual for the area of the organization that you run in getting towards the vision of the mission and following the strategy. Your playbook is the operator's manual for what it is that you and your team do in your area. And, everybody's strategic goals need to marry up with the mothership and the organization above them hierarchically. But when you have the playbook defined, the playbook is the system that you use to succeed in your area of the business. And components of a playbook are typically similar to strategy. You have, the mission of the company, which is why do you exist? The vision is, what do you want to achieve in the long run? And the values are typically the behaviors needed by everybody. When you have clarity over the mission, vision, and values, the next tool in the playbook is your organization charts, who's who in the zoo, and you don't have silos. Then you have a workflow, your process maps. The next tab in a playbook is your expectations or position descriptions. The 7th tab is your key performance indicators. And then the 8th tab, because they don't sell 7 tab sets at Staples and Office Depot, we just named it, but we call it coaching tools, where we put some coaching tools that successful leaders use into that binder. Now, similar to sport, like just imagine the Commanders or my cousin showing up for the '88 Super Bowl. And what if the coach didn't have a playbook?
Right.
How do you think they would have done? And it's the same thing in business. In your playbook is your succession manual, because if you had a really well done playbook and you get promoted up to another position, because quite honestly, if anybody is looking to get promoted, get on this call, you're not going anywhere unless you've got 2 or 3 successors defined and trained, because it's too risky to promote you up. Now, if your 2 or 3 successors are part and parcel of helping you build your playbook, they could probably take over, and it's not career suicide to put together a playbook and train someone to do your job. It makes you promotable. So succession comes easier when you have the GPS of a strategy that you're part of, but you have the playbook for the area of the organization that you run, so that when you leave, somebody else doesn't go through that big dip and has to decipher your hard drive to know what you were doing and how you're doing it. They're part of the system that runs the business already.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense.
You got me started there, so pardon me.
No. That's perfect. I love passion, first of all, but especially when people are passionate about what I am. So we're right there. Molly Detterman and I, we were actually talking about values, and we were talking about the values, putting the values on the wall, and the importance of them being understandable and relatable, as opposed to just being pretty on a wall. And I think a lot of visions and a lot of plans, we focus so much on the wordsmithing of it that we lose sight of the fact that this is a practical tool, right? This is a work process, and that work is seldom pretty, right? And when we can get it out of the cerebral process and into the workforce itself, then it can go more than two and a half layers deep, because it's clearly understood all the way through the organization, is lived out, is communicated out. People see it. They see it demonstrated daily, and not just once a year when we're going to have our annual meeting or something like that.
Yeah, and Michael, you hit the nail on the head. Molly's one of the most values-centered people that I've ever met.
Right.
Leslie Beyer, that she succeeded. She and Tim Tarpley succeeded. And Tim now, being at the helm of the Energy Workforce and Technology Council, you have to be value-centric to remain in a position like that, and that's what he is. Now, it's interesting because, again, like you'd mentioned, you and I met through the Energy Council, and, I had the joy for 11 years of actually helping pass on these concepts of strategy, playbook, and some of the soft skills of leadership. And man, even though we were passing on ideas, tactics, and strategy, man, did we learn a ton during those 11 years from guys like you and other people who participated. Because the world emerges and it just continues to get better. Everybody wants to raise the bar.
Oh, it does.
As Americans, Canadians, North Americans, the way I like to look at it, it's we're all one big family. And I got to tell you, when I go to the Middle East, when I go to Asia, when I go to different parts of Europe, we're admired because we're the new world. To say it that way, back from the 1700s and beyond. Right. But we're the new world that is like we're like the United Nations of the world that has found some way to actually operate in a very efficient manner. Not to say that other regions of the world aren't that way, but we really hold some notoriety in how effective we are and how diverse we are and how successful we are because of that.
So if a company, and there are companies that they're struggling with clarity, right, in their strategy and in their leadership culture, where do you recommend they begin, right? Because it's not just a playbook, because that's a lot of work. A lot of people aren't ready to jump into that right now. But where do they begin?
Well, again, I'm going to sound like your typical consultant. It depends. But, most organizations that come to me and they say, where should we start? And I'd say, well, start in the area that you have control over.
Right.
Okay. Because if you're doing something well and it's recognized, then maybe the higher ups are going to recognize how well you're doing it.
Right.
And you're probably going to get promoted to do it at a higher level. And there's a gentleman at a little company called Envision, which has a North American pipeline network. He was working up in Fort St. John for a period of time, and he pulled together his plan with his team, and he best controlled and best integrated the concept of strategic planning within his team. And he achieved, everybody being part of the answer is going to, people work harder when they're part of the answer. So he had success there, went down to Nashville and pulled together some of the collectors and came back to Calgary and worked with the Alliance Pipeline and pulled his teams together to all be sharing and part of the answer and created that engagement. And now I think Mike I know he's a VP now, and he's got 4 different pipeline or more groups. He's looking after more groups, but he's taken the core philosophy strategy and he's slowly expanding it out. So he has a common language of how we plan. And their senior leadership has a common methodology in how they plan. So he's adopted their philosophies because you don't want to negate the people above you. That's called a CLM or a career limiting move.
Right.
But, you got to make sure that you're keeping the language of the upper leadership group. And just think about that topic or the stat that I put up before. Like, strategy and strategic planning is only clear, understood, and effective. 2.5 layers down from, including the CEO. So if you can do something to align and marry, like alignment is the key.
Right.
And, here's something too. You look at corporate integration. There's a lot of companies that are bonding families together because one company acquires another.
Right.
And when you do that, you go through the stages that Patrick Lencioni talks about, forming or reforming.
Reforming, yeah.
Is always the next step because nobody likes change.
Right.
And unless you do a norming exercise, you're missing out on so much opportunity. It's not
right. But I've seen a lot of companies, especially if they're aggressively growing through acquisition, they get stuck in that storming stage, right? Because it's always buying and storming. You never really get to norming. And just as you think you do something different, that suddenly you're back to storming again. So you don't get that stability that's needed. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can be stuck in storming for years. There's I was on a United Airlines flight, and I had a flight attendant that was actually still wearing their Continental Airlines on their lapel. And, we won't name the flight and the destination I was going to. I don't want to highlight anybody for any negative reason. But, there's pride behind that. But they didn't go through the norming stage to become one new organization with everybody on the same page.
Yeah, I've seen that. So when I took over ops, my thing was our work uniforms are going to be consistent across the board, right?
Right.
We're going to, our visions, we're going to have our main corporate vision. All of our visions are going to tie back to that. So we can get some kind of stability and some kind of alignment through it all.
Oh, yeah.
Because we don't want to be putting all this work into West Texas thinking we're doing something, only to find out that we're misaligned with everybody else.
Well, Michael, one of my partners now, he was my client for just over 16 years. I think you met him before. His name's Dr. Hugh Dunleavy. And,
I have.
And Dr. Hugh, he and I have the same haircut. And
right.
But he's an incredible man. He was literally the most effective and successful leader I'd ever worked for. And about 5 years ago, he called me up and said, "Hey, Pat, I've retired from." He was at Qatar Airways before he retired.
Right.
You have any room for me? And I said, "Well, Hugh, I've been waiting 16 years for this phone call." Yeah. Now, what's interesting about him, he worked earlier in his career. He brought me in to do some work at a little company called WestJet Airlines.
Right.
It's founded and based on the model of Southwest Airlines.
Okay.
And what they had at their airline is every single, their culture won award after award after award. And the reason why, their culture was and is extremely strong. And you said one of the keys to the culture is, they all wore, they had to have pass tags, for security reasons to swipe in their head office. But no matter which office you're at, whether you're at the airport or in the head office or any one of the different stations or locations around their flight network, you had your pass card on to swipe in and out, but you also had another card that had the mission, vision, and values of the company.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And so, people kept it alive. People would talk about it. They have culture moments. The culture moments would be one where they talk about one of the core values or the mission or the vision in the start of that meeting. And the culture moment was just like a safety moment where they talk about the culture and talk about what's happening within the team that's really supporting that value or the mission or the vision, one at a time. And you think, how many meetings do we have? But they were one of the companies that I've shared this story with so many organizations. And there's even another organization in Eastern Canada, pardon me to go north of the 49.
No, you're fine.
But Wilcox Bodies is a company out of Toronto, Milton, Ontario, actually, just north of Toronto. And they have their culture moments. They have achieved one team on the same page. They have their executive strategy. Each division of the company has their own strategy that marries them. They have people within those divisions that have their strategy that marries up, and they all have their playbooks. And to me, they're the epitome of the most effective organization I've ever seen in my whole career.
Right. And that's always been my vision. One band, one sound.
Yep.
Right. And I hear people all the time, they will say, well, we're the same across all of our organization with local flavor. So if you have local flavor, you're not the same.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Well, Michael, back in the day, again, I'm going to go back to BMX, but back in the late 80s when we were doing our freestyle shows, even in 86 at Expo, we'd start our show off. We had a system. We had a process. And we'd start the show off to In Excess Kick. And, you probably would know the song if I hummed a few bars, but I'm not the best musician and singer in the world, so I won't.
Right.
Just imagine In Excess as a band, the success they had if they didn't all play off the same page.
Right.
It doesn't work. Nor do companies become successful if they don't have everybody on the same page. And it's interesting. Our show had we had a process, and we stuck to it consistently, like bands do in the music they play. But if you want to play some great music, bring your team together. Make sure you've got the strategy of you're going to go with the music, and make sure you got the playbook that has all the song sheets of how people play properly.
Yeah. No, that's perfect. That's a great analogy. What's one personal habit or rhythm that you've personally developed that keeps you grounded?
This is an easy one, but I talk to one net new person every day is my goal. And if I do that and I achieve that, my business is good to go. And everybody within our organization, I encourage everybody within our Envision team to do the same thing.
Okay, that's good for the company. But what about you personally, right? You've gone through a lot of change within your own life. How do you stay grounded?
How do I stay grounded? Well, I surround myself with grounded people. I've got my advisory board. My wife is the chairperson of the board, but I surround myself with people who are, if you want to be happier, hang out with happy people. If you want to be successful, if you want to, you've got to have a good organized system. So hang out with good organized people.
Right.
I hang out with people that support me. It was probably the biggest tip personally and professionally. It's helped me become happy. It's helped me achieve the things that I want. But and I even remember doing one time I was in Nashville with the Predators, NHL team.
Right.
I was doing a summer camp for all of their prospective players. And one of the items that, the coach at the time, his name is Barry Trotz. He's the general manager of the team now. But Barry came up to me and he said, Pat, that was a really cool thing you said. And I said, well, what did I say? He said, well, I hope to impress this on the players for the rest of the time that they're trying out for my team, is make sure that the people they hang with support them and support their vision.
Yeah.
And just make sure that you surround yourself with people who support you and don't take away from you.
Right. Yeah, because you see that in professional athletes a lot, right? They're great. They're focused. They're really about the sport. Then they allow themselves to hang around people, their friends, their buddies, the people they're going to kick with that are not as focused.
Well, especially as you start to move your career forward and you start to go to higher levels.
Yeah.
In hockey, I remember reading, this was just this morning, I was reading some media where our local Calgary Flames just signed one of our top goalies to a 7-year contract. The guy's making big money. I won't say the number, but it's, just imagine those big numbers attract a lot of people who want a piece of that. So you got to be pretty selective as you move your career forward to keep with the people who keep you grounded.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, now don't think less of me for what I'm about to tell you, but I have never watched a full hockey game or a full rugby game, a match. I guess I've never focused enough to understand the rules. When I look at them, even though I don't understand the sport, I can understand what they're bringing to it, right? I can understand the challenges that they have, because it's not just about that moment of the fight, right, in the ring or on the rink, but it's about all the prep work and everything, and business is just like that.
Oh, it is. Yeah. Well, business is like baseball. It's like, well, the one sport that's most akin to business is volleyball. And so you've got 6 people on the court on both sides. And if you're playing volleyball, catching your team members doing something wrong, you'll lose.
Yeah. Right.
You've got to be supportive. You've got to be positive. And that comes back to the advisory group that you select to be around you. Volleyball is probably the best sport. And I married a collegiate volleyball player. My wife is a physical therapist and a former volleyball player.
Right.
A little taller than me, mind you. I'm only 5'6", so it's. That's the one sport where it's visible. If you see somebody who's negative on the court, that team will lose.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is back to Jack Welch's thought, right?
Yeah.
You have to eliminate that from the team, because if you don't, right, either change the behavior, change the mindset, or eliminate it, because it will bring the whole team down.
Well, last point I'll make to your question, like what does help me in the success I've had. The other point is a Jack Welch point, is I've always had a stretch goal.
Right.
And I keep it private amongst my advisory group, select members of them, but I always have a stretch goal, and I always have something, a higher level item that I'm always working towards, because I'm driven too.
That's a real good point. We don't grow in comfort, right? So we have to stretch ourselves out of that comfort area. Okay, so if you could give one piece of advice to any leader that's listening right now, they're standing right at the edge of that big transition, what would that be?
Well, first one is dream big, don't dream small. Second one is build the confidence of the people that you need to achieve that dream big goal.
So where can listeners learn more about you, coaching work, and the Envision Group in general?
Well, our website doesn't really tell you too much about us. It gives you a high level, but it's envisiongroup.ca. And on YouTube, we have a channel. It's youtube.com/Pat Lipovski. So
okay.
Lipovski. And we've got a number of different videos that we've shot over the years down in Texas, all over North America in some of our workshops. But the videos themselves that are shot are actually the voice of the people we've worked with more than us. And so
nice.
It's better to hear from the people we've worked with than us. And I think their messages speak for themselves.
Okay, yeah. See, I didn't know about the YouTube channel. I'm going to check that out. What change in your own life are you most excited about stepping into right now? Because you're entering 60. You're 60 now, right? You're entering into that next season. So what big change are you excited about?
Well, what I'm excited about is we're starting to develop succession within our own Envision team.
Right.
And, the we is growing to far more than just me. And
right.
We're looking forward to having others that are going to continue. On the athlete side, of course, this play to lead is taking our Envision content and having other former elite athletes deliver. So that's part of succession there. The other part of succession is having others that are going to carry the Envision brand forward long after I decide to skate off into the sunset. And I think I still got a good 10 years left in me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, you're young, you're healthy. I think, one of the challenges we would always give to leaders in the church and to our church members was, extend your prayers beyond me and my three. And I think that's what you all are doing at Envision Group, right? It's not just about you. It's not just about your small core. It's about what does that next generation look like? What does that look like beyond there? But not growth for growth's sake. Right, because you exist to help people be successful, help them to be whole, help them to be balanced, and I appreciate that in you. I did from the first time we met, so thank you for that.
It's interesting because our Envision team, we're 22 wide right now. We're going to grow before Christmas. We'll be even more.
Right.
But quite honestly, we've become a heck of a retirement haven because people that are leaving their leadership and executive roles that like what we did for them are joining us. And we've got another guy coming and joining us here in the next few months. He's an SVP with a very large notable corporation in Canada. And he likes what we do. And he wants to use this as a vehicle to give back to others the same way we are. So that's we've grown. We're acquiring as people retire. And it's the pay it forward, just like that movie, Pay It Forward with Joel Haley Osment. It's the whole philosophy of taking all the wisdom we've acquired in our careers and passing it on to the next generation.
I met with a guy named Dave Jewett last week, and he's the founder of Your One Degree. And we were breaking out his chart for the different seasons of your life. And really, at our season, it is about taking now what you've learned and then paying that back. All right, Pat, anything that we didn't talk about that you would like to cover?
You know what? I think we've covered everything. If I've made you happy with answering your questions, I think we've accomplished all that we need to do for now.
You could have came on, just talked about BMX, and I'd have been happy. But I'm above and beyond now. So thank you for that. So
a lot of good memories revolved around both that. But I got to tell you, I had so much fun in my BMX racing and freestyle days. But I got to tell you, what I do now is even more personally rewarding.
Oh, yeah, I bet. Yeah. All right. Well, Pat, thank you for joining us today and sharing such valuable insight on navigating change and transition. Your journey from helping world-class athletes to guiding executives and organizations reminds us that change isn't something to fear. It's something to embrace as a doorway to new growth. And for those of you listening, if you want to learn more about Pat's work in the Envision Group, you can visit envisiongroup.ca, or you can go to YouTube, I found out now, and I'll put that in the show notes, or you can connect with him directly on LinkedIn. So I'll put all of that in the show notes. As always, thank you for turning in to Lead Well, Live Whole podcast. And if today's conversation encouraged you or gave you something practical to take back to your leadership, I'd love for you to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone navigating transition in their own life. And remember, leading well begins with living whole. So until next time, keep leading with clarity, courage, and conviction.
Thanks for joining us on Lead Well, Live Whole. If this added value to your journey, share it with a friend and subscribe. Until next time, lead those you serve well and live your life whole.